What is going on, FA Nation? My name is Justin Fensterman, along with Jon Impemba, and it's time to talk some DFS hoops. Get you ready for tonight's DFS NBA slate here on FantasyAlarm.com. Jon, what's going on? How are you?
Fence, I'm doing pretty well. I love being live at this time of night because it's when injury news starts to break, and right as we go live, Jeremy Grant ruled out due to rest tonight. Sort of changes some things around for how we're going to take a look at the Pistons, put some more players in value in their matchup against the Pelicans tonight, and we're waiting on more injury news to come as well. So it should be a pretty good stream tonight here, Fancy.
Yeah, that's Jeremy Grant. That's not allowed. He's not allowed to rest. Please, if he's going to be taking home some hardware at the end of the season, then he better not be resting a lot of games. If you know what I'm saying, most improved player. Anyway, right. Other injuries that we got to note: the San Antonio Spurs, they're back in action. They've been off for about 10 days because of COVID issues throughout the team, but they'll be without the following player. They'll be without DeMar DeRozan. They'll be without Keldon Johnson. They'll be without Rudy Gay. They'll be without Derek White. They'll be without Devin Vassell. That is a lot of players right there, Jon. But LaMarcus Aldridge will be making his return. So that's something that we're going to have to focus on when it comes to value.
Yeah, 100%. And Lonnie Walker, for sure, is one of the biggest ads for tonight for value. It'll be something that we're going to talk about a lot. Should be high ownership there.
Let's talk about some of the other injuries going on. We've got Victor Oladipo questionable with the foot. We will give you injury updates throughout the stream, as we always do. John Collins questionable with a concussion, so we're going to have to see that. He's going through some tests as we speak. Eric Gordon questionable with an ankle injury. That popped up. Kemba Walker is resting. Tyler Hero is questionable with that hip injury. Devontae Graham is still out with the knee. Dennis Schroeder out with the COVID health protocols. Goran Dragic is questionable with an ankle injury. Cam Reddish is doubtful with the Achilles, and Jarrett Culver will be back in action for the Minnesota Timberwolves. At least we think he's probably heading into this game, Jon. So without further ado, James Grande is on the playbook. Go to FantasyAlarm.com and get the playbook, the DFS NBA playbook. We will give you updates as we go, and as we always do, let's start with the point guard position, paying up a good amount of options. However, normally when we pay up, we're looking at 10K plus. But I got to bring up my guy from the starting five because of all the injuries and players out for San Antonio. How doesn't DeJounte Murray smash in this matchup? There are not many other players to take shots away from him.
No, I mean, I think he's in a great spot. Like we mentioned, there's no DeMar DeRozan, there's no Derek White, Keldon Johnson's out, and Murray himself has been playing really well all season long with those guys in the line. I mean, he had 55 fantasy points the last time they saw the court, which was 10 days ago, Fancy, because they've missed a lot of time due to the COVID situation that's sort of going through their team. One of the reasons why all those guys are out, as we talked about. And this is a great matchup against the Thunder. Thunder not a great defensive team, but the best part is we're not really worried about a blowout here either. We think this should be a competitive game. We should get the most out of DeJounte Murray here tonight. And his price tag is actually really solid. He's only $7,400 over on DraftKings tonight. Over on FanDuel, you see him priced out at $7,500. So, we're talking about a core mid-tier part of your lineup tonight that you're going to see DeJounte Murray with some pretty high ownership, which our draft forecaster also sort of predicts as well.
Yeah, and points and boards, that's the name of the game. We'll give you the dimes and steals too, but the boards, that's really where it's going to come down to. And I like his chances tonight. What about paying up? What other guards are you going to be looking at from a point guard standpoint?
I mean, listen, I love Trae Young. He played 2 games against Boston last week. He went for over 50 fantasy points against both of them. He had 50 fantasy points again last night. We asked him to spend up. But this is just a great matchup for him. There's no Kemba Walker tonight. They're going to be rolling out Peyton Pritchard, Tremont Waters, and Jeff Teague to try to slow him down defensively. Didn't work the other games when they tried to do that as well. So if we're looking up top for me, I think Trae Young probably tops the list. Malcolm Brogdon's fine against Golden State. 3 strong games for him. There was an overtime game mixed in there to kind of help boost the numbers. But for me, I'm really just focusing my lineups at the top here, going Trae Young, going DeJounte Murray, and then we're going to look at value, especially on DraftKings tonight. Saban Lee, somebody now that we've seen back-to-back games, play 30 minutes, give us almost 10x return on his price tag, and now with no Jeremy Grant. Now, Lee hasn't been starting these games. Dennis Smith Jr. has been starting. Lee's been coming off the bench. Probably going to continue. But without Jeremy Grant on the floor, it just opens up more shots for everybody. It's going to be hard not to look at $3,800 tonight for Saban Lee on DraftKings and throw him in your lineup.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't have him in at this point. I mean, and it's amazing because we don't have to worry about paying 10K plus. So we're already, for one of the first times in a while, at least on the streams that I've been on going into these slates, we're not paying up to start. So I almost feel like we're playing from ahead here because we're not paying up for Lee right there. 3,800 on DraftKings. It's too good. I got to ask you about a player here because it's a great matchup. But you, me, James Grande, who's on the playbook talking before, Kobe White, love-hate relationship with him. Love him in reality always. But when it comes to fantasy, man, it's always these highs and lows with him. And even in a good matchup like Minnesota is for almost any guard, I don't know if I have that trust for 6,500 on DK.
Yeah, my problem with Kobe White tonight really isn't my faith in him as a player. It's that I think Zach LaVine is going up against his old team the day after being given his first career All-Star nod. I think he's just going to take 30 shots tonight. I think he's going to be the show. He's going to show everybody why he's an all-star. And if you have one guy taking 30 shots, how is really anybody else supposed to produce that's supposed to be a shooter?
Well, if we're going down this road of all-stars and we're going to start playing up these narratives, I mean, Devin Booker should have 100% ownership then, right? I mean, who's going to be more motivated to score 50 than this guy at this point?
Right. Now he's an all-star snub, and we've seen guys in the past when they've been snubbed for all-star games do the same thing. Dame Lillard, of course, loves having career games the day after being snubbed from an all-star. So you certainly can. It's a matchup against Charlotte. My biggest problem is that Phoenix has been blowing teams out lately, and it's been limiting the minutes of some of their top guys. And while Booker has been very productive lately, even in those situations, if that ends up being the case again, does he play 25 minutes tonight and then you don't get the full run? So Booker for me, 100% just a GPP only play. But right, if we're looking to play narratives, I mean, there's a lot of guys on this list tonight that are either first-time All-Stars or snubs from All-Star games that you could play that up for sure.
Yep, someone who's not an all-star, though, because we're talking about the shooting guard position. Go mid-tier, and this was someone who, when you and I talk about, we talk about NBA about 8 times a day on average, John. So you were looking at Kevin Huerter, and I've cooled off on him. I was hot on him for a while. Then I started missing, and normally when it comes to those guys who are middle of the road, maybe need an injury, I kind of step back a little bit and become a spectator. You like him going into this matchup against Boston, even with, I almost said Jon Impemba, even with John Collins' status in question.
Yeah, I think he's fine. And Collins being out, if that ends up being the case, because it is a concussion issue that he is trying to clear, he's questionable. We know Reddish is doubtful. The shots should be there for Kevin Huerter. He had a big game last night. The question is more so, Boston's reeling. Do they step up the intensity tonight? Do we get Jaylen Brown just playing intense defense, making sure that nobody kind of scores on them? Or, how does Boston come back from, they lost a 20-something point lead against the Pelicans last time they took the floor. And now they have Atlanta. I think they're going to try to make a possible statement here. And that's going to worry me a bit with Huerter, especially at the price. It's about $5K. It'll be curious. I'd like to see who they start at power forward tonight if Collins is ruled out, if it's Danilo Gallinari, more of an offensive player, or if it's like Solomon Hill, who's more of a defensive player. If it's Solomon Hill and Tony Snell out there for Cam Reddish and John Collins, then I can see Huerter taking a lot more shots because, those two guys aren't offensive players. But if Gallinari's starting tonight at power forward, if Collins ends up being ruled out, well, Gallinari is probably good for 15 shots. And that could take away from them. And
remember, Reddish is doubtful right now. Achilles injury. Yep. I see doubtful in Achilles, and that looks like a bad sign.
Right.
So Kevin Huerter could have some nice value. Ooh, I'm loving the value. It's amazing, man. Between San Antonio and Detroit, especially, and Atlanta, those 3 teams, you can get so much value on this slate. You really can. I mean, this makes me want to spend up for Zach LaVine because of look at all the San Antonio guys. We were talking about Lonnie Walker before.
Lonnie Walker for me, I think is about as bigger core play tonight than we've seen in a little bit. we've always gotten these value guys low, and you're like, all right, there's always risk with these 3K players, but like we've seen Lonnie Walker again be like a part of this rotation this season. In games where he's played over 30 minutes this season, he's given you 30 fantasy points. He had a back-to-back stretch earlier this year playing 30 minutes, gave you over 30 fantasy points in both of those. It would, the only maybe slight hesitation is that it's San Antonio and Popovich could play Patty Mills 35 minutes tonight instead, and like Lonnie Walker doesn't see the floor. But what I like about Lonnie Walker is that he's not just a shooting guard or a point guard. He can play both wings. He can play the 3 and the 4, and they're without DeRozan, they're without Keldon Johnson, without Devin Vassell, without Rudy. They need somebody to play those forward positions. So I think that Lonnie Walker is going to play 35 minutes tonight and could be one of the top scoring players per point, price per point on the slate.
Yeah, I mean, you get attacked with under midcourt too, and that's why you're going to be looking at that San Antonio value. Let's talk about some of the other high-priced guys because, again, we were talking before the NBA team on FA. LeBron James, he's almost 11K on DraftKings, 10-4 on FanDuel. And we talk about now having those spots to pay up, but do we necessarily take the bait in a horrible matchup, it seems like, for him?
I mean, there's never really like a horrible matchup for LeBron James, but if there were on this slate particularly, I don't really want to have too much LeBron exposure. Utah's been blowing everybody out. They've beaten the best of the best in the league. And if this ends up being a game where they, get that big lead, what are we going to expect out of LeBron in terms of paying off the price tag? It's not that I think LeBron's going to go and have 20 fantasy points tonight, but if he gives you 42 fantasy points, you're missing out because you can get that production for a cheaper play. This isn't the best matchup to be conducive for him to give you that 35, 10, and 10 game. To me, I just don't see that type of situation happening tonight. It is the late night hammer. It is that 10 p.m. game that we like going and getting some exposure to. So if that's a reason to have him, then that's fine. Talent-wise, he's one of the top 2 players pretty much on the slate overall. But yeah, I'm on a fade LeBron for tonight. We'll see if that comes back and burns me or not.
Jaylen Brown's right there. I mean, you got to love him. I mean, when it comes to Boston at this point, it's 2 guys that are controlling, especially with no Kemba in there. So Jaylen Brown, even though you're paying above an 8K price point, 8-4 on both sites, it's still a phenomenal matchup for him.
It is. Now, I'm going to be interested to see what they do here because the last time Kemba Walker sat out a game, they actually had started Jaylen Brown at point guard in that game. And Brown struggled for a bit. He ended up finishing, I think, with like 35, 36 fantasy points because he's not a point guard. He's definitely more of a shooting guard, definitely more of a small forward. But they had actually started him at point guard, so I'm going to be curious to see the starting lineup that Boston throws out there tonight because if he does start at point guard, the assist potential will be greater for him there. So that's something to watch. I like this matchup again for Boston to bounce back against Atlanta. Tatum for me is my number 1 for sure. He's just locked in right now for 50+ fantasy points. He did it both games against Atlanta the other day. If John Collins is not a good defender, but if he's out and they're sticking in Danilo Gallinari, they somehow got worse. So I think Tatum's in for a must play tonight.
Yeah, I mean, James Grande hit the nail on the head as well with some of those small forwards that he has. Malik Beasley is a great option going up against Chicago. Otto Porter is still hurt, so good option for him. No D'Angelo Russell on the other side of that. And then we have the Detroit situation. We've got Sadiq Bey with now no Jeremy Grant, no DeLon Wright. It's really now going down to Josh Jackson, Sadiq Bey. Who do you like better between the 2?
I'm going to go with Josh Jackson for the scoring upside. Bey, we have seen a little bit from Bey at times scoring. It came off the bench against the Celtics. He had his career game. It was like 30 points and over 10 rebounds. But I think Josh Jackson, for the pure volume scoring that I think they're going to end up looking for him tonight, is the direction I would lean. But Bey for cheaper, I think, is going to get a lot of ownership now as well. Just looking at the way it could possibly run into, he's $5,600 tonight over on DraftKings. Jackson is $6K. Again, I'm curious how the starting lineup's going to play out. They started last night, and Fancy, maybe you can help me out with his last name. It's Svi You know, it's Mihailuk, Mikhailuk.
It's Svi Michailuk.
Michailuk. See,
Yes.
I was somewhere on the right track there.
It's hard, man. It's very hard to say.
Yeah, he started
for a second. It stuns me. That name and Anzej Pasechniks.
Right. Yeah. The guy in the Thunder, right? Yeah, that's a tough name too. So if he ends up starting again, he's $3,100. He played 22 minutes last night against Orlando, had 20 fantasy points. If he starts again tonight, I think there's a case to be made to play him. And there's just a lot of value, again, adding to that slate. He's a good shooter. It's a good matchup for him, and the opportunity could be there.
Let's move on to power forwards. You mentioned Jason Tatum already, and somebody else that we have to mention, two people that are both in the playbook that I do like tonight, one of them being Draymond Green, who I like just about every night, but it doesn't make sense. Why is the Pacers front court so bad? They have, when you look on paper and you look at the players individually, they have a very stacked front court. I know that they have some issues with wings still, and hopefully that subsides in the next few weeks. But they've got Turner in there, good defender, and then they've got Sabonis, but they still are bad defensively overall. I don't get it. Do you?
Yeah, they're not great. I mean, Turner's a great shot blocker, right? So it's sort of, you know, if you're worried about maybe some rim protection there, yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. What do you think, Vince?
So here's my thing. Here's my thing with this. Yeah. Even though you've got a little bit of a healthier situation going on with the Warriors, I still think that almost benefits Draymond Green and gives me a little bit of a safer floor when it comes to his assist potential and trying to figure that out. So if he has guys cutting to the rim and they're not defending in Indiana and you can destroy them, then that's going to work in his favor. And that also is going to probably make him the recipient and maybe gives him a little bit of a bump in scoring. That's the way I see it. I mean, do you disagree with me?
No, I think you're right. And he's been good, and the assist numbers continue to be there for him. So I don't hate it. I think it's a good play.
Yeah, it's a good price still. So, yeah, and then somebody else we're just going to talk about from a value standpoint, because it doesn't matter who's in or out, because they don't have DeMarcus Cousins, the Rockets. They don't have Christian Wood. Jaylen Tate can play 3 positions. They need him. They're going small. He grabs boards. He actually contributes defensively. And I don't care who's in or out for this team. They need to make sure Jaylen Tate is playing 30 minutes a night when all's said and done. He deserves it. He's a good scorer. He's been consistent. He's rebounding as well. I mean, how can you not like him? And we continue to get him at fair price points.
Yeah, listen, this is a great spot for him again. You know, and Jared Allen is not a good defender at the center. And I know they started PJ Tucker, but like Tate's going to play in that, you know, that post play for them as well. Torian Prince expected to be back. Seti Osman, like, it's just a good matchup for them tonight going up against Cleveland. And we loved Tate the other night. He came through big for us and should continue to be a productive player. Now, we're waiting on Victor Oladipo news, if he plays or not. I think Eric Gordon is questionable. Like, if those guys come back, like, it takes a lot of shots away. So that would downgrade him slightly for me. But I still think he's going to start and play like 35 minutes. So the value could be there.
They have nothing up front. They need him at this point. And he's more skilled than Dorian Finney-Smith, which is great. And I like Dorian Finney-Smith, but Dorian Finney-Smith, a good reality player for the Mavericks. This guy can do more. He's more versatile. By the way, seeing news come out of Atlanta here, Cam Reddish out, John Collins, game time decision. So this point, we're keeping him on the side.
Yeah.
So
and we'll have to wait and see. It sucks that, you know, they don't know yet, right? Like, I would like to know sooner rather than later. Fortunately, this slate starts at 7:30 and that game starts at 7:30, so we'll have our answer.
You got a little bit of an extra time. I mean, seriously, you have to make him a game time decision. You just can't make him questionable. Right. What's going to change in the next hour? Nothing's going to change. Give us an answer, please. Right. If not, then we're giving a hard look at Mr. Gallinari. But one more question for you, because we did talk about San Antonio before we move on to the centers. LaMarcus Aldridge. I thought about it. The salary is great. The price is great. He was not great before he got hurt. Looked like a shell of himself. Was not rebounding. Only scoring. Even though the Spurs have a lot of their midcourt out, I still don't want to trust him, man. I still want to wait and see how he looks because I wasn't impressed with him before he got hurt and he hurt his hip.
Yeah, for me, the question really is mostly minutes than it is than anything else, personally. We've seen at times this year he's been okay. Earlier this year, he was fine. There isn't like a huge sample size with him like off the court with DeMar DeRozan in them, so it's hard to look at like how he generally would have been productive. But like I would assume his usage rate's close to 30% with those guys off the floor tonight. But is he going to play 20 minutes?
I looked it up. It's about 40%.
Even right.
But he's not at full strength. I don't view a guy who has had a hip injury, especially a season.
Well, I don't think they're going to force him back without being healthy. I don't think they don't need him active tonight. They have 10. They don't have 8, right? So, like, if he was good to go, I think they would put him out there. The question is, because he's missed so much time, how many minutes does he plays? And
that's what my concern is.
That is the concern. For me, it's not really the ability or the matchup. It's the minutes. So I'm with you on the fade there if we're not comfortable with it.
Right, and that's why. Because, again, it's a great price point, and I don't always want to go chalk. But at the same time, we have not been given any indication on minutes for him. So if he plays just 20 and that's it, let's say for some reason they get destroyed because of the lack of depth that they have, I don't think that will be the case. But I still don't like what I saw in Aldridge even before this injury. He's not playing like a big man. He's literally a bailout three-point shooter. That's what he is. And it pisses me off that I saw him like that. It makes me actually sad more than mad. But now he's coming back. So with that, I'm not – if he ends up playing well, great. Moving forward, we'll take advantage of the price point for the next couple of games until it balloons up and we don't want to pay anymore. For tonight, we don't have anything on a minutes restriction or not. We could get that 5 minutes before. I'm not playing with that fire tonight, John. That's my decision.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't blame you either. I wouldn't touch it either.
But someone that I am going to mess with a lot, KarlAnthony Towns, as we move to the center spot. Sub 10K, man. I was a little bit surprised by that, weren't you? I mean, what's a better matchup than this? Wendell Carter Jr. sucks.
I mean, right. It's a great matchup on both sides of the coin, to be honest with you. We're seeing production out of Towns now that makes it look like the player he was prior COVID. We're seeing that 50-plus fantasy point upside. We know Wendell Carter is not a great defender. He's very foul happy. And you're, like you said, you're getting him for under $10,000, so you're getting a good value on a player like Towns. That should be the focal point of this offense with a new coach and everything that's going on there. My only small concern, and I know he already played it back-to-back, so it kind of counteracts my argument here, but it is a back-to-back. So that's my only small hesitation. That, and I do like guys that are cheaper than him. Jared Allen, for me, I think, again, back-to-back play for him going up against Houston tonight. At his price point, I think it makes a lot of sense to save the money on Towns tonight and spend it up on a Zach LaVine or a Jason Tatum and guys like that who are in similarly great spots.
And you get that spots where you can afford both LaVine and Towns with all the value we gave tonight.
No, you can. I just think you can also get that from Allen tonight, that you can get close to 50 fantasy points. And then we played Wendell Carter last slate, and he gave us 45 fantasy points playing over 30 minutes. And you can attack Towns on the offensive side of the basketball because he doesn't play any defense. So
you want to see
those are the core center plays for me.
Yeah, you know what? And I don't blame you. If you want to see how bad KarlAnthony Towns is defensively, just go to my Instagram at Fensterman Sports. I posted a video regarding Giannis kind of getting at him, and he poses no threat. Doesn't use his body at all. You can just see it by watching these plays. So again, KarlAnthony Towns, bad defender. Wendell Carter Jr., awful defender as well. So both centers are in play. But yes, you can save money. Any other value centers that you like going into this slate? I mean, you already talked about.
Yeah, I think Tristan Thompson could be thrown into the conversation. He's played very well of late. He's boring. He's more of a cash game center than anything else. But he could get you a low-end double-double. He's an okay passer. Recently, he's chipped in with a block or steal here and there. So I think Thompson is fairly safe if you want to go in that direction. Kelly Olynyk maybe even as well. Very, very cheap. Minutes for him have been down lately as well, but centers against Toronto, front court against Toronto is a matchup that we'd like to attack as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the Pelicans, are you looking at a Zion Williamson for tonight. I know Steven Adams is going to be back in this lineup, but that really doesn't matter to me. Zion's going to control the post regardless. Might impact his boards a little bit, but to me, it's not going to impact the scoring.
Yeah, I like Zion. Zion's fine. I have no problem with him. Again, he's starting to give you that secondary production. So the fact that it's helping raise his fantasy floor only bodes well for those throwing him in their lineup.
Yeah, I mean, looking at some of the other matchups, again, that we can really pick on. Minnesota, Chicago. You've really tried to get me off of Towns tonight.
I'm not trying to get you off Towns. I think Towns is a great play. And if you can fit in the right stacks around him, it makes sense to use him, especially maybe on FanDuel where you don't have sort of all those multiple position eligibility players and utility spots. Towns certainly could fit a lot of builds there. FanDuel oftentimes is a little bit cheaper as well, so you can build some better lineups. But again, I'm just looking at price per dollar. We're getting some more value opening up. Guys you want to maybe fit in because there's better spots, whether it be a Sadiq Bey, whether it be a Josh Jackson now. You're trying to fit in the Spurs players and the DeJounte Murray with the value of Lonnie Walker. Like, there's guys that you want to sort of build your lineup around. And if you also want to include some of those high-priced guys, like maybe a Trae Young or a Jason Tatum, a Zach LaVine, like we talked about, Jimmy Butler even, who we didn't mention, but I think is in a fantastic spot tonight against Toronto. It's going to be hard to fit all of those guys together. So if you're looking at the depth of the position and guys at the price points that can maybe match the elite players' production, for me, like Allen is as close to matching Towns, giving me 50 fantasy points, as somebody at 7K could give me what Jason Tatum could give me. So that's just the way I kind of look and build my lineup. So it's not that I'm off Towns or don't think that it's a great matchup. It's that I think there are guys that are cheaper that could give me similar production where I don't think that exists at the other position. So I'd rather spend up there than spend up at center. So it's not to say that can't be true. It's just how I'm looking at the slate tonight.
What are your expectations for Siakam? That was someone I debated putting in the starting five, and I kind of cooled off on that. I don't know if it's Bam, but maybe it is Bam.
Nobody likes going up against Bam. He should have been the most improved player last year, and he is a great defensive player. They go small. Siakam's been starting at the center at some times, depending on the rotation. We don't know. I assume OG at this point is going to play. Last time they had it back-to-back, there was zero mention of him sitting all day. And then 30 minutes before lock, he was ruled out due to rest because he missed that long extended time. So if that ends up being the case, like, it could throw guys like Chris Boucher more in the field of play there as well. We expect Kyle Lowry to be back, and they said they've been starting Siakam at the center spot. So it's a little bit of a tough play for him, but I think that game could be quite interesting, honestly, from a sneaky game stack perspective. If Goran Dragic and Tyler Hero are ruled out again, Kendrick Nunn is coming off two huge games, 50 and 45 fantasy points, I think it was in that realm. So he could very much be in play if those guys are ruled out. Duncan Robinson's in play if those guys are ruled out. So I think Miami-Toronto could be a sneaky game stack. Guys like Norman Powell have been really productive on the flip side. So those type of plays in the mid-tier could definitely get you there.
Are you going to mess with the Pistons big men at all? Because you can find some value there. Again, no Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, I think I said Sadiq Bey is appealing. I'm not really in on Plumlee. Nothing against him. Again, it's more center. I like other centers than I like him. I'm not going to go with Dembuya, who could see a bump in play.
Isaiah Stewart, not him.
Yeah, Stewart's still the backup center. He's not the power forward. So, there's no real help for him there.
They said they were going to try to play him, too. I don't know what happened. When they got him, they're like, we got this guy to play him.
He played power forward last year for the Nuggets next to Jokic at times. So, they could go in that direction. But I don't see that being the route they take tonight.
Yeah, neither do I. It's wild. You can follow John on Twitter at JImpemba777. You can follow me at Fensty Sports. Get in the chat, get your lineup set, get ready to win, because at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, that's when domination begins. That's called winning time, because that's what we do on fantasyalarm.com. We always dominate. No other option. We just win.